Thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me here to Saudi Arabia. It's incredibly exciting, and what a wonderful country. It feels that there's so much potential here. My name's Joe McLeod, and I design endings. I never started out wanting to design endings. I've actually got 30 years career building products, whether it be service, digital, or physical products. And I've worked across big businesses, corporates, all over the world we delivered our products. But a few years ago, I started to think about the end of the consumer life cycle. And I want to convince you in this session that you need to start looking at endings seriously. So we can break down the consumer life cycle in sections: onboarding, usage, and offboarding. At onboarding, we create amazing, attractive stories through advertising and marketing. In usage, we create incredible products, services, digital products that empower the consumer, ease their life, and create wonder in their life. And at the end, the consumer, we abandon them, and that person, that individual, needs to walk that lonely path of usage to the end on their own. I think this is an enormous opportunity space and super important. In fact, I've written a couple of books about it, which I'm going to give out to people at the end of the session. So come up and get one of these books later. But let me give you a tangible explanation of this. With printer ink cartridges, my printer runs out of ink every 5 minutes, so I go out, buy a new printer, take it home, take the old printer ink cartridge out, put the new one in, and I'm standing there with a printer ink cartridge thinking, what shall I do with this? I look on the packaging, 2 other marketing messages. So I'm abandoned. I don't know what to do in this situation. Personally, I go online and I try and find out, what should I do? This company, I find out, has been doing a really good recycling reclaiming program for 20 years. But I don't know about this in this context. But I fill in a form and then they send me this envelope. It takes 2 days to get to me. I put the printer ink cartridge in the envelope, then I take it up the post office. It takes 2 days to get back to them. It's taken 5 days to offboard this consumer experience. It was hidden from me, the consumer. I was abandoned at that last part. And this goes on in products, services, and digital products. And this is a place we need to start building consumer experiences. But this didn't start recently. This actually started many years ago. So let's do a quick history tour. And it started in pre-industrial Europe. And we go back there because that's the start of the Industrial Revolution and the start of marketing and advertising. And really, life was simple. The consumer experience was simple. The waste from the kitchen table would go to the animals. The waste from the animals would go onto the land. The harvest and abundance from the land would come back to the kitchen table. It was a circle of experience as well as just consumption. It was visible, it was actionable, it was understandable to people in pre-industrial times. Ever since, we've been turning this experience into a linear narrative, and then we started splitting the end from those other parts of the experience. So on one hand, we've been building incredible consumer experiences, making them faster, better, easier to get hold of. And at the end, though, we've been making it more distant, making it scientific, making it complicated. So it's created this almost split in all of us. On the one hand, I'm a consumer and I know loads about consumption. I understand all sorts of nuances about how to buy things, how to order things, how to assess things. But my other self, my person who's worried about other things in life, the civil self, is overwhelmed by this. We haven't got the instructions or the support. So the consumer self beats the civil self. So in the work that I've been doing in endings, there's this gap at the end of the consumer life cycle, where we've previously put ever such a lot of effort into creating consumer experiences, onboarding and usage. We've created meaning, purpose, brand equity, and at the end, we abandon it. And this end gap has 4 characteristics that are the cornerstones of many of the problems that we have with consumerism. The first one is that the relationship breaks. This is the relationship which we were so precious about at the beginning of the consumer life cycle. Thank you, Joe, for being a customer of ours. We're so pleased to work with you. We tell the customer all these things. But at the end, we just walk away from it, leaving them alone. The second one is asset definition is lost. At the beginning of the consumer life cycle, asset definition is everything. It's a 4-megapixel camera, it's a size 6 pair of shoes, it's a 2-litre engine, it's a 1-hour flight. All of these things are the definition that make us want to buy stuff. But at the end, that's merged with other assets in the waste stream or service offboarding to become meaningless. And even in data, we start to merge databases, create data lakes, and they're really difficult to really analyze those and quite impenetrable. The third thing is actors and actions are anonymized. So at the beginning of the consumer life cycle, I'm celebrated as a consumer. Well done, Joe, for buying our product. We love the fact that you're our customer now. At the end of that consumer life cycle, we're anonymized as consumers, abandoned at the end to walk that lonely path, usage to the end on our own. And the fourth thing is route to neutralizing blurred. If, for example, I consume an apple, I'm very confident I can put that into the landfill or the environment and it decays naturally in that environment. But if, for example, I have a plastic bag, I wonder, how does this get neutralized? Or if I've got a digital relationship, I'm really good at signing up to that digital relationship. At the end, I leave that relationship and I think, what's happening to my data? Routes to neutralizing become blurred. So in many of our businesses and in business culture generally, we've grown to have this attitude about a single engagement. And this single engagement, as always said in business culture, there's a consumer over there, I'm going to target them with advertising and they're going to become my customer. And then they're going to be with me forever. Nothing lasts forever. Because ends happen. And ends come in and they shatter off broken experiences. And these are the problems that we have around in society, in the environment, in digital. These are the waste plastic, privacy being used, pensions being lost. We need to move to a multiple engagement model that acknowledges endings happen, that considers them a place to do great consumer experience. And we can make these collaborative, conversational, and keep them under control. Let's look at financial services as an example. Historically, financial services were pretty simple. And I apologize here, this is a little bit UK-centric, some of this stuff, but it generally works the same in most places. Financial services used to be pretty simple. We'd have one relationship with an employer, give us a pension, and that would take us to the grave, and we might have other mortgages and stuff like that around it. This was a simple landscape. What we've got now is very different. Loads of products targeted at different demographics, making all sorts of opportunity spaces for that consumer to empower them financially. Many of these are great products with onboarding and usage. They tend to not have great offboarding though. And if we're making this many products, this means there's this many endings to resolve as well. So in the work that I've been doing over the many years that I've been engaging with this and doing conferences and working with clients, I've developed some techniques and tools. So I'm going to just show you one of these now with phases of the end. Now, stories are really important for humans. We have been telling stories for many, many thousands of years. It was the primary source of information over generations before the printed word. But still in films and books, we really honor the story we tell, and that they're really critical to wrapping up the experience and giving resolution and meaning to the whole story. The end is really important. This is Elizabeth MacArthur. She's a film critic, and she says of endings in stories, closure in narratives attempts to preserve the moral and social order which would be threatened by endlessly erring narratives. In consumerism, we don't tell the whole story. We do a great beginning, a great middle, and then we leave the end. Imagine ruining your brand without the end of that story. This is Richard Newport. He says, solid closure in conventional narratives and histories satisfies individual and social desire for moral authority, a purposeful interpretation of life, and genuine stability. That's pretty profound to think about not doing the end of your story with your product. So then, how we build narrative arcs in narrative structure is that we create this amazing primary narrator. So at the beginning of a story, you'll be introduced to the theme. You'll have a sort of a narrator voice, the typography, the noise, the sound, the music introduces you to the film. You then come down the next stage with messages and symbols. That's the establishing shot of a film. Like it gives you an idea of what place it is, what time it is. And then you get introduced to the actors and actions, and the story starts to take place. And at the other end, story resolution gets happened, and then you move back out of that with a re-establishing shot, and then finish the film with typography, music, narrating voice. And what we do in consumerism is half of this. We do advertising, marketing, telling this story. Come to us, join us on this story. And we get up to actors and actions, and then we do nothing in that last part of the journey. So what I've built is an offboarding sequence, phases of the end. There's 7 phases to this ending, and each one of these helps the consumer and the provider join together collaboratively and add meaning to the offboarding experience. So at the beginning, you get this crack of doubt. This is a subconscious doubt that people go, maybe I'm going to leave this business. The next phase is acknowledged, bringing this to the foreground and making sure, okay, I'm going to leave the company. And then you start to build in action sequence so you can feel like you're doing something about it. Observation, so you can see that the end is happening. And then you start to look at settled and resolve the types of endings that you think. Aftermath tells the emotional story, it's very heightened. And then rebirth is a quieter place where the person might think about rejoining again. This is the end sequence that consumers and customers go through. What I often get asked is, okay, Joe, what's the ROI of endings for our business? So I'm going to tell you why it's really important in a business sense. Now, I can't answer the question ROI in a special, this is going to be 25% to your magical business. I can tell you a number of other things. And I'm going to break this question 4 sections. Where are the potential costs for creating consumer offboarding in your business and your product experiences? Where is the growth area in consumer experience? how to value consumer experience at the end of the consumer life cycle, and how do we to protect our brand equity investment over long term. So these are areas that if you want to invest in building endings in your business and product portfolio, you need to start to think about the business culture. We can't do anything without business culture change in any sort of transition that we're making, so that's critical. We also need to up skills in terms of creating endings. The good news is that you have a lot of the sort of personnel already doing good work in onboarding and usage. You need to reskill them to do endings and really understand to what they're looking at. And that means also building research, measurement and tools as well alongside that. You also, one of the biggest areas of endings is legislation. Now, just in the recent years, legislation across different cultures and different business sectors has come in looking at endings in particular. GDPR, which I know you have a similar sort of consumer protection thing here in Saudi Arabia. GDPR, 3 very clear endings in the legislation about it. But what we tend to do to the consumer is bombard them with legislation and text. We don't create experiences around that ending. So aligning with legislation, you can actually increase the benefit of using endings to help that. And lastly, logistics and assets. If you're a physical business shipping physical products, then reverse something that you'll need to look at. And if you're a digital business, then it's quite a bit different. But let's look at this more chart. These is the customer journey and where your current personnel are applied. The new types of jobs and roles will be in orange, where you're looking at the end of the consumer life cycle. Okay, second question. Where is the growth area in consumer experience? We put a lot of money into onboarding and usage periods in the consumer life cycle. Stacks of our money in terms of investment goes into those sections. The consumers are very anxious about overconsumption, privacy in social networks, and all sorts of other areas. These aren't necessarily the growth areas, so we need to find a common place to work together with consumer anxieties about consumerism and a new place to look at investing for better benefits with our budgets. The third question is how we cost consumer experience. Now, I'm just an individual. I'm not a really experienced big company like KPMG, but so I took one of their models and how they price consumer experiences. And what we tend to do when we price consumer experiences is create this moment in time, which is the absolute best consumer experience that we create. And by making it moment in time, really removes us from any of the responsibility of the product degrading over time. If you're, and I'm sure many of you are like CEOs and senior people in businesses here, how many of you buy any big building or big car or anything like that and imagine that product being perfect forever? It doesn't happen, does it? We have to price in degrading emotional experience as well. And that's what we need to do with endings. We're mispricing our current customer experience because we only price it at the optimum place. The consumer ends up taking it to the grave and having that burden of putting up with that degradation. The last thing in the return of investment thing is your brand equity. How much do you spend on your brand every year? Advertising budget, the photography budget, the point of sale budget, all of these things. How little money and opportunity, and how often do you ever talk about the end of that? And making sure your brand doesn't erode over time because of bad endings. Let me give you some examples of companies which do endings. This is 3, the mobile phone company. Now, 3 in Denmark. And by the way, mobile phone companies are some of the most aggressive in terms of retaining their business and retaining their customers. If you try and leave some of these businesses, they keep you on the phone for an hour. And so there's mindset in here of keeping your customers no matter what. The fact is that people leave businesses and leave products. So 3 Denmark, they decided to introduce the beautiful ending. And to be honest, their senior management was very scared about making it easy to leave the business. But they built an easy ending. They called it a beautiful ending that the customer could quickly leave the business through the app. And they made that really simple and beautiful and elegant and branded. So they introduced that product, they launched it, and all the senior management are watching as they switch on the switch, thinking everyone was going to rush out the door. No more people left. It was a wonderful success. And it also meant that their service team, the people on the phones, could focus on product quality, not a sort of a paranoid keeping people in the business. It saved them loads of money. The second example is Kaya Cars. Now, about 15 years ago, Kaya Cars introduced the 7-year warranty into their business. Now, most cars were sold previous to then on a 2-year warranty. So a 7-year warranty seemed crazy. The interesting thing with 7 years is humans find it hard to project beyond 5 years. So when you introduce a 7-year warranty, you're introducing product death, a funeral of the product, as it were. Now, when they introduced this, since they've introduced this, their global market shares doubled, their customers love the 7-year warranty, and they consider it highly above every other aspect of product offering. Kaya Cars, by offering an ending, really improved their product, their brand, and it meant that their consumers are still engaged in that product. And lastly, Disney. Disney are one of the best consumer experience companies on earth. At the end of every day, they know endings matter. They know that endings matter to lay down memory. If any of you are familiar with Daniel Kahneman's work on peak end rule, you'll know the psychology power of endings is super important. In consumerism, we tend to try and go for repeated peaks. That gets you 50% of memory laid down. You need to do the peak and the end at the end of the consumer life cycle. Then you're looking at laying down good memories for 100% of the opportunity. Disney know that. That's why they punctuate the end of their days with a massive firework display. Thank you very much. That's the end of the session. If you want to stay in touch, start engineering. The books are on Amazon. You can use this code to get cheap books on Smashwords, on ebooks. And if you're interested in training, I do corporate training. I've got many big world clients. Check out the website for more information. And if you're interested as an individual, sign up for the course. It's online, on demand, and one starting next week. Thank you ever so much.